अभी टमाटर का भाव इतना बढ़ गया है कि टमाटर खरीदने का सवाल ही नहीं है
ना। महंगा है सब कुछ, क्या बताऊं। टमाटर से लेके अदरक, हरी मिर्च।
पहले 500 रुपए से काम हो जाता था, अब 800-900 रुपए की सब्जी भी वो हो जाती है।
ऐसा हालत है कि नॉर्मल आदमी तो आजकल फ्रूट्स खा ही नहीं सकता।
आज के टाइम में एक सैलरीड इंसान एक फिक्स बजट पे चलता है। कम खरीदने के अलावा कुछ नहीं कर सकते तो कम खरीदते हैं और थोड़ा केयरफुली यूज करते हैं।
पहले तो ये था कि 20 रुपए का टमाटर लिए अपना 1 वीक चल रहा था। अभी तो क्या है कि लेने के लिए भेजा होगा टमाटर, तो अभी 10 रुपए के 2 टमाटर आ रहे हैं। एक छोटा दे रहे हैं, एक बड़ा दे रहे हैं।
मगर ज़्यादा लेंगे तो भी ये टमाटर लेके फ़ायदा नहीं है, क्योंकि दूसरा दिन ये टमाटर खराब हो जाता है कि उस पे फंगस आ जाता है।
बेचारे जो 6-6 हजार रुपया, 5-5 हजार रुपया, 7-7 हजार रुपया में अपना महीना गुजारते हैं, तो वो कैसे दिन गुजारेंगे?
These are voices of common people like you and me, from across the cities of Mumbai, Delhi and Kolkata, as they spoke to Team TMB about the latest problem that has squeezed their budgets. Yes, the record high prices of tomatoes. Tomatoes are being sold at upwards of 150 rupees a kilo, with the 200 rupees mark also breached in some markets. And this is over 5 times what they were trading a year ago. Now, whether you call it tomato or tomato, it doesn't matter. Right from our grocery bills to our news headlines to our WhatsApp memes, tomato inflation has secured a place in our national consciousness. Most of us would have heard about the smartphone shop owner in Madhya Pradesh offering 2 kilos of tomatoes complimentary with purchase of phones, or the vegetable vendor in Uttar Pradesh who hired bouncers to manage his customers. But these stunts apart, a sharp price rise has forced fast food chain McDonald's to drop tomatoes from its menu across several of its stores. From the point of view of the consumer's basket, tomato has become way more expensive than the price of a litre of petrol. As a fruit, its prices are now in line with apples and plums. I reached out to large tomato traders in Narayangaon and Nasik to understand the ground realities.
अभी माल ही किधर तो भाव बढ़ेगा ना। कोलार मंडी है, वो मंडी में से रोज की 500 गाड़ी निकलती थी, आज की तारीख में उधर से 50 या 60 गाड़ी निकलती है। ये भाव आज तक नहीं देखे हमने। ज्यादा से ज्यादा 1500 रुपए तक देखे। कम से कम 15 अगस्त तक ये तेजी रहेगी। क्लाइमेट सही नहीं है, उस हिसाब से फसल अच्छी नहीं है। फसल अच्छी ना होने के कारण पेड़ के ऊपर माल नहीं है, माल नहीं है, इसके हिसाब से ये तेजी है। तो अभी जो बोलेंगे वो 2 महीने के बाद चालू होगा, 2-2.5 महीने के बाद चालू होगा, तब बाजार लेवल में आ जाएगी। पिपलगांव, वनी, जेवरगांव, ये जो सेंटर है ये 15 अगस्त के बाद में चालू होने वाले सेंटर है। उसके बाद में बाजार में कटौती होगी।
2200 रुपए अच्छा पैसा बना है किसान तो, और बनना भी चाहिए, क्योंकि 50 रुपए भी बिक रहा था 20 किलो का, 2.5 रुपए किलो।
1 अप्रैल में जिसने लागवड किया ना टमाटर की, उसको भी पैसा बन रहा है अभी। और जिसने फरवरी और मार्च में जिसने टमाटर लगाया था ना, उनको पैसा नहीं बन रहा है, बना ही नहीं उनको।
In a country where onion prices have contributed to the fall of national governments, one would assume vegetable price inflation would be a priority issue for the authorities.
हिंदुस्तान के किसी भी कोने में जाइए, 3 सब्जियां जरूर नजर आएगी: टोमेटो, ओनियन, पोटैटो। और इसलिए मैं कहता हूं टॉप प्रायोरिटी टोमेटो का टी, ओनियन का ओ, पोटैटो का पी, TOP, top priority.
Ironically, just 2 months ago, there was a glut in the tomato market, with farmers in Nasik throwing away their produce in frustration for not being able to recover even the cost of production. This news didn't make it to the national headlines. What kind of a market behavior allows producers to suffer on one hand by not compensating them for their cost of production, and on the other hand makes the consumers pay through their noses? Can such instances of sharp volatility in the prices not be avoided? How does it work globally? Where does the buck stop? And just how long do we keep the tomatoes off our kitchens? We get you these answers and much more in today's episode of The Morning Brief, where we decode India's tomatonomics in discussion with agri-experts in academics, mandis, startups, corporates, and commodity exchanges. It's Thursday, July 13th, and I am your host Kiran Somvanshi from The Economic Times. This is The Morning Brief. Originally from South America, it's believed that tomatoes made their way into India in the 16th century through the Portuguese explorers. And over the centuries, tomatoes became an integral part of our cuisines, be it in our dals, curries, chutneys, salads, or sauces. So much so that India today is the second largest producer of tomatoes in the world after China. We Indians love our tomatoes, fresh and local.
In India, we produce almost 16 to 20 million tons tomato annually. It is scattered production. So the major cluster, which is basically Kolar, Chikballapur in Karnataka, which constitute more than 10% of the total production. Then we have cluster in Pune, Nagar area in Maharashtra. Then we have Solan in Himachal Pradesh. Then Jalandhar in Punjab. Then we have basically Madhya Pradesh, Ratlam and area around that. So although tomato is grown across country in almost all districts, these are the national clusters.
That's Maruti Chapke, founder of agri-market startup Go for Fresh, which is based out of Vashi. He has been in the agri-markets for over 20 years working with corporates, modern retail chains before turning an entrepreneur. While tomatoes, onions and potatoes, all three are sensitive commodities for India, Chapke tells me how tomatoes are different from the other two.
So unlike onion and potato, tomato is slightly different because other two like onion and potato, the storage system is in place and there is a mechanism for price stabilization, which is initiated by the government of India time to time, as and when required basically. So we can store onion during peak period when the rates goes down below cost of production or maybe a threshold. Similarly, the government can intervene and stabilize that price. But if you look at the schemes, till time there has not been any scheme for tomato per se for the price stabilization perfect. So reason being one is like the perishability is quite high. So obviously it has to be treated differently compared to onion and potato. So for potato, there is a cold storage infra is available around production belt also, and you have cold storages around consumption point also. So the similar structure is not available for the tomatoes.
Well, tomatoes along with onions and potatoes have the potential to move the headline inflation by more than 100 bips. And the RBI's inflation target for the current fiscal year is 5.1%.
Problem is actually for 2 months. So there are two issues. One is glut and another is shortage. So this glut happens basically for few weeks. It may extend for, let us say, 3 weeks minimum, 2 to 3 weeks to 5 to 6 weeks. So that's the window. Same window happens for the shortages also.
So if all goes well in case of weather and other conditions, there could be a bumper crop in the summer. Then in worst case scenarios, the farmer may need support if prices drop below the cost of production, that is below 4 to 5 rupees a kilo. On the other hand, if supply gets disrupted during the monsoon season, then prices surge due to shortages, hurting the end consumer like you and me. Maruti tells me that it is typically the period between June 15th and August 15th when tomato prices act up based on the supply situation. But this year, the situation has been exceptional.
So this year was unprecedented. This time all clusters were affected, right from Himachal to Kolar in Karnataka. So that was one major reason. This is one time where actually we have seen the prices going up to very high levels. So I think this is lifetime high tomato rates that we have seen.
So while several factors such as inclement weather and pest attack came together to create a temporary supply crunch this time around, I wonder if the situation could have been avoided, since the seasonality is known by the market players as well as, I suppose, the government. Professor Sukhpal Singh of the Center for Management in Agriculture at the IIM Ahmedabad tells me why it is not such an easy situation to avoid.
One has to keep in mind that you can't have very foolproof systems here because these are perishable commodities by nature. These are affected by seasonality. But more importantly, also, whatever we produce in tomato, for example, 25% is the post-harvest losses. So 1/4 of the crop goes waste, doesn't reach the market. So that brings me to the supply chain issues. That there are also issues in terms of our supply chain management, in terms of warehousing, in terms of storage infrastructure, logistics, in terms of transportation of such produce, which also adds to the problem of shortage of supplies in this kind of situation that we are seeing now. And then we also have issues in the market. For example, one of the reasons I would also attribute this to is that for the last 10, 12 years, increasingly we are denotifying fruits and vegetables from APMC regulation. We are saying they don't need to regulate these commodities or their transactions because these are perishable. But I think having no regulation is no good because then you don't know how the prices are being transferred from one link in the chain to another or how people are making money or losing money.
But then don't these scenarios actually expose the need for having that warehousing? Because we assume that they are perishable and we don't need to keep them for long. But rather, shouldn't it be more for these perishable commodities that we need warehousing?
Warehousing, actually, it's more about controlled temperature kind of local level storage. There are some agri startups and some local innovators who are doing this at a very small scale. But for onion, at least, there is some local level storage structures in Maharashtra, I saw personally, at the farmer field level. But in tomato, there's nothing on the ground which can be talked in terms of scaling up and so on. So there is a need bringing some amount of shelf life enhancement for tomato because it's highly perishable produce.
How does this happen globally? Also, right now, tomato prices have flared up in the UK, in Spain. Typically, what happens there? How are prices regulated or not regulated? Do they leave it to the market forces to determine? How does it work?
I think we need to appreciate that the way perishable produce markets are organized in India and the developed world is very different. For example, 80% of the fruits and vegetables in UK are just sold by 4 or 5 supermarkets. It's a very well-entrenched, organized, large-scale corporate sector there, which run the supermarkets of different size and scale. So that is one part, that this is a very organized system there. They have all the investment made into the system. They have all the carrying and other infrastructure. It's almost totally private in that sense. The second is better shelf life. The way produce is handled, right from picking up from farmer's field until it's retailed at the supermarket store, it's very different there. I've also seen, I've studied it. So that is, I think, very important to keep in mind. But there also, I think, when this thing happens, supermarkets are also instructed to not charge any amount. And there have even, in China, there have been cases of the government subsidizing some of these products through supermarkets, because that is the channel from where consumers buy. They don't have wet markets like India has. They have some farmers markets, which is also a good channel. I think we don't have, unfortunately, that kind of farmers market which are in big cities. We have a little bit done by the state here and there, apni mandis and so on, but they are not really that kind of farmers markets which offer you very good quality, hygienic produce in a hygienic place.
So, of course, they are not comparable the way things happen here and there. And we don't have a large organized market. As you pointed out, in UK, you have 80% of the produce being channelized through supermarkets. In India, that could be only 8 to 10%. But having said that, how do you see things becoming better? Where do you see the solutions lying? Government coming in, or these corporate chains becoming bigger, or startups coming in, or the farmers community joining together? How do you see things kind of shaping up?
I think all the players and stakeholders you mentioned, all of them have their respective roles. For example, you're talking about infrastructure. It is both government and the private which need to invest in it. If you're talking about making players behave or markets behave, then government has a regulatory role. If you're talking about helping people in the supply chain, government has an enabling role. I would still not agree that you just denotify fruits and vegetables from APMC regulation. Because if you just don't regulate at all, how do you ensure that the prices are transparent, or different players do not really make abnormal profits and do not make profits at the cost of somebody else? For example, we have new channels like contract farming. I think perishable is the most relevant crop for this. Farmers will grow what is being asked to be grown by the contracting agency. Then we have direct purchase by some of the supermarkets which they're doing. We need to have more of that. So we need to have multiple channels to which farmers can sell from their field itself. Every farmer need not bring the produce to the APMC.
Right.
Of course, APMC will be the last resort for farmers, if at all. But I think we need to have multiple channels for farmers to sell their produce, which can take this produce way to the market. And of course, the government can also play its role by what is already in place in India called market intervention scheme. There are at least 9 or 10 states which have been implementing this scheme over the last few decades in partnership with the union government, saying that the prices of this particular produce are falling for farmers. Can we go and procure? Similarly, Kerala has announced minimum prices for vegetables. some 24 vegetables, they said we will pay at least this much to the farmer. This I'm talking to the other side of it. That prices also go down frequently when farmers lose.
Right.
Yeah. But similarly, government can also come on the consumer side. I think there need to be a price control in terms of how much you can charge. So I think all that is possible to be done if we are not able to match the demand and supply all the time.
Professor, I wanted to understand, like in any industry, whenever there are inefficiencies or whenever there are gaps, there are always players who come in to fill that gap. Why, despite agriculture being such a huge enterprise in India, why haven't companies or small firms, large firms, have not seen that as an opportunity to fill these inefficient gaps? Why that has not happened?
It's a very good question. I would just take you back to the story I sort of always say. We had a lot of spurt in supermarket activity in the early 2000s until the 10, 12 and so on. Especially Gujarat was one of the states which had all kinds of players come in and try to do this fresh fruit, vegetable retailing. But within a couple of years, all of them disappeared. Now only one or two are left here. Those who have a good business model or deep pockets, only they remain. Rest of them shut shop and gone away. So I think one perception that it's easy money to be made in perishable produce was wrong. You need to first invest in the chain to make money. You can't just set up a collection center and then have a AC store where you procure from farmers directly and you procure only one grade, that is A grade, and then the farmer has to take B and C somewhere else. Then farmer's job is further complicated. Then you come and try to sell it in supermarket. So that doesn't really help, because there's also dump at the end of the day, which is of the order of 10% in any supermarket store. So how do you recover all those costs, even if you're trying to buy directly and trying to sell directly? So I think a lot of the supermarkets which survive, they are not just surviving now because of fruit and vegetable, but they are selling many other products, whether bakery products or cereals or other processed foods.
Yeah, I remember the DMart store in my neighborhood eventually discontinued selling vegetables and fruits.
I think it's easy to say that informal sector is making a lot of money in this domain. But given the wastage I mentioned, both in the post-harvest side as well as in the supermarket stores or at the retail level, it is not that easy to create a model. A lot of companies said we want to buy all kinds of produce and make different kind of products from the tomato. Pepsi had planned this, that we have all grades bought, then we'll use it for different products and different markets. But one has not seen it happening on the ground. So it's tough to make it, especially when you're dealing with the small farmers across multiple locations in India. Having this kind of business model is a challenge unless you are willing to put up for some time, 3 to 5 years to get it going, which I think a lot of players or investors don't want to do. They want to make a very quick money on their investments.
This highlights the problem of the markets for perishable commodities being quite shallow and fragile. There is an absence of a common price discovery mechanism at the national level. I spoke about this with Kapil Dev, Chief Business Officer at NCDEX, India's leading commodity exchange. How can exchanges help in price dissemination? Of course, tomato contract is not there on NCDEX, but how does an exchange being there helps?
Exchange's role is to provide a fair market platform, a fair price discovery, which helps everyone in the value chain to understand about the market today, for tomorrow, and maybe for multiple months going forward. But the issue is that because of the sensitivity of these things, multiple times, especially like country like India, exchanges become, the shoot the messenger kind of thing happens in this country. So we have seen multiple times when we have these kind of commodities or some commodities where price movements are happening, commodities trading is banned, suspended, restrictions being put on that, which we don't see anywhere across the globe. Last 3 years, we have seen multiple crops, commodity cycles, prices going into very dangerous zone, lifetime high, then correcting sharply. But we haven't seen either Europe, US or China or anywhere where there's a derivatives market getting suspended. I think we need to put a little more focus. We are 100% sure that commodities being on futures market bring stability because you are opening market for thousands of people. The moment you put it on the derivatives market and it starts trading, it becomes a national price and everybody starts connecting to that. Futures price definitely give you a lot of indication about a short-term and long-term price situation. But we avoid for the two reasons. First, these are definitely sensitive commodities. And second, perishability and infrastructure as of now is not as great that there is a comfort among every segment of the market that should be on the derivatives market.
So the perishable nature of the commodity makes any intervention difficult. Maruti from Go for Fresh tells me how startups are helping the growers of perishable produce.
From growers' perspective, they are facing two challenges. Number one challenge is the market linkages, and second is the finance. So these are the two top priority challenges. Basically, they want someone who can promise them, okay, every year I will come and I will buy your commodity or whatever quantity you produce and connect it to the right market. So the contribution from the startup is basically they have explored all the markets. So earlier, farmer used to have mandi as a one option where he can sell his produce. Another option could be like collection center of any company. So because of startups, they got multiple buyers for them. Secondly, because of the technology use, the rates are now available. So it's a transparent transaction. So people know at what price we are going to sell. So as a farmer, they know the price before they sell it.
There are several agri startups such as Ninja Cart, Kheti Gadi, Bharat Agri, and Crow Farm that are creating online marketplaces or providing business guidance or tech support on supply chain from farm to plate.
So I think startups have created alternative channels to the growers where they can keep exploring the different channels. This time mandi is good, so sell to mandi. Some startup is giving good rate or some companies. So at least they have options. Secondly, because of different apps, they are able to access the rates. There are some startups who go to the farms and they buy back the commodity at the farm gate itself. So the farmer has one more choice. If they don't want to come to their warehouse or mandi or market yard, so they can sell it at their, like in case of pomegranate. 10, 15 years back, farmer used to send it to APMC market. So now if you see the trade of a pomegranate as a commodity, 95% happens at the farm gate only. Only 5% come to mandi through auction or maybe where the price may not be upfront available to the growers. So now the trade has changed actually.
Yes, it has in many ways. An important but growing element of the agri ecosystem are the corporate consumers who buy agri commodities for their products. I spoke to R. Narayanan, who is Vice President Central Planning and Procurement at Dabur, to know from him how companies function and protect their interests from price volatility.
First of all, we don't want to get ourselves caught in such type of events. So what we typically do is that most of the items which are very, very seasonal in nature and there is no alternate for us, we directly go and buy those type of items during the season itself. For example, mango. We sell mango juice throughout the year. So we need mango pulp throughout the year. So typically mango comes during the summer time. There is no other way. Every company has got their forecast and what is going to be the sales for the coming year. So therefore we go and buy our requirement during the harvesting season itself.
Handling volatility in commodity prices is in the DNA of the large corporates. But it becomes really difficult for small and medium enterprises that depend on stable raw material prices to operate their businesses. We spoke to a small food joint owner in Kolkata to understand this.
I'm Anup. I own a small food joint in South Calcutta. We sell mainly snacks, like typical Bengali type snacks, like rolls, chops, cutlets, all this. It's a pretty busy joint, but recently we are facing this unprecedented problem, which is the kind of exponential rise we are seeing in ingredient prices. See, we are used to normal increase over time. Now this jump rise, it's pretty insane because we can't balance it out with menu pricing. The clientele we have, they are stuck on a certain kind of menu pricing. Like it's one of the appeals of snacks and local fast food. You know, the price point is pretty low. We can't update that every day. No one will come. No one will accept that. So we can't balance out the raw ingredient cost by just increasing price and putting it on the consumer.
Well, the situation didn't have to be so grim and hopeless. There are some great examples to emulate in India itself, as Narayanan from Dabur tells me.
There is no better example than milk. India is the largest producer and consumer of milk products. If you look at the milk supply chain, it gives a fantastic example to us. I don't go and buy today milk at 10 rupees one day and 100 rupees the other day, like the way what is happening in tomato. Similarly, for a farmer also, they don't go and sell milk at 5 rupees one day and 50 rupees the other day. Farmer gets 20 rupees, I pay 25 rupees for that one, adding up the supply chain cost and value addition cost. And the problem of seasonality or the problem of excess production during certain part of the year and low production at certain part of the year is managed very well in a commodity like milk by means of value addition. When there is an excess production, they make a skim milk powder, they make butter, they make ghee, they make other value added products. And during the lean season, it gets reconstituted, again made into a liquid milk and so on and so forth. So I would say a policy from the government side in terms of developing similar type of supply chain for fruits, vegetables, and other agri commodities will really help us. For example, sugarcane farmers are being regulated by means of minimum support price. The sugar mills buys these sugarcane, process it, and we don't suddenly pay 100 rupees for sugar and one day 10 rupees for sugar. That does not happen. Similar type of definitely can be done for other items also, be it edible oils, be it pulses, be it vegetables.
So, if we already have existing successful models, why haven't they got replicated in other items? What has prevented this thing from happening?
If you look at the success stories of milk, there is a set of people, right from an bureaucrat or an executive to political people to the entire ecosystem itself. So the similar type of ecosystem is not getting developed. That's a problem today. The political willpower is not there. Today, there is a inefficient mandi system which is operating. APMC markets, if you really look at it, I don't see them doing any value addition. They are just collecting their fees or cess, what you call it, but they don't provide that facility to the farmers, actually. People have their own vested interest. The same model of a cooperative-based milk supply chain is not available throughout India. There are few states where it is very successful. You take Gujarat, you take Rajasthan, you take Maharashtra, you take Tamil Nadu. The cooperative is doing very well. If you go to some states like Orissa, you go to states like West Bengal, you go to some of the northeastern states, that model is not so successful. You go to Bihar, the model is not so successful. So I would say that the political ecosystem, the bureaucratic ecosystem, their willpower is a must to do some changes.
Well, political or systemic will to duplicate the working of the dairy or sugar industry looks tough to come by anytime soon. But it definitely indicates that there is a clear white space for an aggregator that brings together the producers of perishables on one end and supplies to the retail consumers on the other. It can either be farmer-producer organizations or agri-tech startups. Meanwhile, the consumer in me got tempted to ask Kapil from NCDX, when does he see tomato prices softening?
I think at this point of time, the supply chain is definitely disturbed. All the producing market are not able to supply. There are issues at ground on the quality side. And weather still is a concern. We are seeing a lot of rains happening around. I don't think immediately it will happen, but hopefully next 15 days, we should start getting prices stabilizing at a level and then correcting. And one more thing, if prices are good, farmers do utmost care for their crop. And they will do best to maintain the crop, protecting it from disease and pests, and automatically supply improves. I'm sure it will not again sustain for long. It will start correcting quickly.
While we will soon start seeing tomatoes back in our recipes and on our plates at the prices that we prefer, climate change is making sure that we act fast to secure our future food supplies from disruptions. As Narayanan pointed out,
the climate crisis I'm seeing as a long-term threat, and that requires a global political willpower to tackle it. Now you can see the incidence of weather crisis across the world. The glaciers are melting, the ocean levels are going up. One year we are getting a lot of rainfall, other year we are having a lot of drought. So this requires a structural approach, and one single country cannot tackle this problem. It's a global threat to the mankind, so it has to be tackled. If we don't tackle it, still the volatility in the prices will be there, and these type of crises in terms of sudden disruptions in the supply will happen.
The scary images of flooding coming in from Himachal Pradesh should drive this point home for policymakers as well as consumers. The largest industry in India, employing most of its people and making the country one of the top producers in the world, is also one of its most inefficient. Post-harvest loss of over 20%. Storage infrastructure for perishables almost absent. Intervention to control the wide volatility in the prices? Not always. It is indeed amazing that farmers of the most populous country in the world are able to feed its bulging population despite all these odds. Incidentally, tomato is neither an essential commodity under the Essential Commodities Act, nor is it an indispensable item in our kitchens. Probably that's why price flare-ups are treated to be one-off incidents and not paid much heed to. But when price flares up exceptionally like this time around, it exposes the inherent flaws in the system and pushes the system to do something about it. If not for this price flare-up, it was unlikely that the government would have rolled out the Tomato Grand Challenge Hackathon that invites innovative ideas at various levels of the tomato value chain. And it's quite likely that once the price abates in another few weeks, the ideas generated from the Grand Challenge may remain restricted to some files or committee meetings. Private sector, of course, will see opportunities in this problem and try to fill the gaps, but the Indian agricultural landscape is too wide for few companies or startups to fill all the gaps. It has to be a concerted, committed, and joint effort put in by the governments, both central and regional, private players, civil societies, and farmers themselves. A tall ask, right? So that's it for today. This is Kiran Somvanshi from the Economic Times, and you are listening to India's Tomatonomics only on the Morning Brief. A special thank you to our guests Dr. Sukhpal Singh, Maruti Chapke, R. Narayanan, and Kapil Dev for sharing their amazing insights. This episode was brought to you by sound editor Indranil Bhattacharjee and producer Vinay Joshi. Executive producers Anupriya Nair, Anirban Chaudhary, and Arijit Burman. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, do share it on your social media networks. A new episode of the Morning Brief podcast drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Don't miss it. It streams on Amazon Prime Music, JioSaavn, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And of course, ET's own audio platform, ET Play. Have a great day ahead. All clips used in this episode belong to the respective owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.